What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Whenever I take a look at Challenger and Master Tier gameplay, there's always a lot of tricks that pique my interest, because although they might seem minor or easy to miss, they can make a huge difference in a lot of situations, and it can be hard to notice if you're just watching games casually rather than scrutinizing every single move. But since I'm certainly not a Challenger player, I've brought in a Master Challenger Tier player, Azo, to help me out with the video today.
Hey guys, how's it going? Azo here. I do educational League of Legends videos focusing primarily on microplay and personal improvements. I'm probably most well known for my Z School series, an in-depth guide where I look at all aspects of Z, but I also do item reviews, game analysis, and the off-satirical and discussion video, not always tailored to League of Legends. So if that sounds appealing, make sure to drop by my channel.
So big props to Azo for helping me compile this list of tips and tricks, so that way all of these tricks are coming from a high ranking player. He's a great player and has some great content, so definitely check him out if you haven't already. Now these tricks are a little bit random, and although you might know about or have done some of these once or twice before, the key thing to understand is that Challenger and Master players use these tricks to their fullest potential every single game very consistently, and you should too if you're looking for a bit of an edge. And let's kick it off to Azo's to start us off with the list.
Our first tip to start things off involves a way that I use to predict my opponents. Both you and your opponent are looking to read what the other player is going to do next, and a frequent way of getting that insight is the consistent pattern that some players and champions follow. For example, LeBlanc will almost always use her W after a Q. Well, if you start expecting that every time or notice a pattern your particular opponent is playing around, you can start to counter towards where they will be moving. And this happens with a lot more than just ability combos as well. Say for example you're trying to hit a skill shot in your opponent. Quite often, players will typically dodge the same direction if they're not aware of this concept. Think of it as their gut reaction to seeing the skill shot. They dodge in some direction, sometimes left, sometimes right. Every player is different, but by observing the tendencies your opponent makes and taking note of the consistent things they do with their abilities and their movements, you can get a huge read on them and can easily take advantage of it in further skirmishes or in the future scenarios of trying to land your skill shots. There's a little bit of a risk to doing this though, in that you start showing the same pattern response to what your opponent is doing. For example, a Graga's body slamming towards a LeBlanc's W after she's used a Q. If you keep doing that every single time, well, LeBlanc is going to use a Q and then wait for you to body slam and then W when you're sitting duck. So depending on how much faith you have in your opponent, you might have to be a little bit tricky with this, as to not fall in your own trap. Our next tip involves a bit of the opposite of the previous tip, and is a good way to avoid your opponent using those prediction techniques on you. Clicking quickly up and down or back and forth will make your character spasm between the two locations you're clicking. This isn't just to increase your APM and pretend to be a StarCraft god, it's actually very helpful to play around the first tip, as it makes your movements harder to read. It's also very useful to dodge skill shots, because you stay moving, and you're always active, instead of standing still and having to be ready to start moving when you see danger. This type of movement is better than standing still or changing directions slowly, since it makes you less predictable. If you're just getting started with this, I would recommend keeping the cursor close to your character, as it makes the distance for your cursor to travel shorter, and thus faster. But if you get used to this, try increasing the range a little bit, so you can simply stop clicking when a skill shot comes towards you, and your character will move away on its own.
Alright, for our next tip we have another trick that involves predicting enemy movements. One key tool during the laning phase that you should always be capitalizing on is in fact your own allied minions. When one of your minions start to get low, your opponent is going to walk up to it to try to get the last hit. If you're constantly watching your minion health bars, you can tell when your opponent will start moving towards them, and thus you can plan after that. This is one of the best times to make an aggressive move in lane, either by landing some harass or to initiate a trade. And this is going to do one of two things if you time it properly, depending on the opponent. Either they'll take free damage and won't be able to fight back, as their time and animations are used to last hit the creep while you're attacking them, or they recognize the threat of your damage and they back off, meaning you zone them out and they lose the CS. In both situations, you end up with a nice little advantage that, when performed often and consistently, can add up into a significant lead. As well, with this technique, if you're doing it constantly, you really get to assert your dominance in the lane, and it might make some players start playing defensively even if they don't really have to, because they're scared of you and they have to go through you to get their CS even if they're ranged. Our next trick involves using some of the underappreciated mechanics that wards have on both ends of the spectrum. When a ward dies, there's a slight moment of time after its death where it still gives you vision of the location that it was in. One way to take advantage of this is when your opponents clear one of your wards, you'll usually get to see a glimpse of the direction they are headed in after they finish attacking the ward. Using this, you predict their future location based on where they were moving towards in the last few seconds of the vision. But you can also take advantage of your opponents using the same mechanic on you. The flip side to this is, as the one killing the ward, move towards where you want the enemy to think you're going, or maybe start channeling a recall. Essentially, you fake your direction or next take of action after clearing the ward until the vision fully runs out a few seconds later. This way, after the brief moment where your opponent still has a vision of you, they'll get like a false sense of security. If the opponents were paying attention to you and are aware of this mechanic, it'll result in them having an incorrect prediction of your movements.
The next one is a lot simpler than all the rest, but it can still be useful in a lot of situations, especially if you're thinking something might be up. It sounds minor, but if you have nothing to do, and you find yourself just waiting for minions or waiting to gank or dive in a brush or similar, just start channeling your recall. Cancel it before it finishes, unless you actually want to recall, but just keep starting the channel over and over again. Since you're already standing still, saving the time on the recall channel is just a small potential time saver, but in some situations it can be a lifesaver. If you really need to get out of there quickly, you don't lose anything on it, it doesn't cost you anything and you weren't doing anything in the first place, and you can easily stop the channel if you want to stay. Our next trick involves a great strategy for taking Baron that a lot of people fall for, especially in solo dynamic queue. A good and all too uncommon way to bait Nashor is to have one of your players reveal their location to the opponents in mid lane, especially as a mage or someone who can wave clear and have pressure by themselves. The mid laner is usually the best person to do this, since mid laners typically don't have that much damage to Baron, but have the tools to push out mid and to pressure the lane. When someone shows mid lane, or really just anywhere on the map visibly, while 3 or 4 of your team is sneaking Nashor, you can easily let them sneak it, sometimes without the enemy team even realizing. By revealing your location, you can both zone off enemies who want to start moving to Nashor Pit, but you can also push the minions so that they have an incentive to stay in lane and de-push your farm. But the key thing is that it makes it seem like you aren't actually doing Baron. People often assume that Baron is definitely being done when they don't have vision and the whole enemy team is missing. So when they see someone in vision, it's more common to assume that Baron isn't being done. The minions you shove in mid also give vision on if your enemies are still in lane. Thus, you have information on if they're going for Baron without having everything warded. Just make sure you clear the wards around Baron, otherwise this trick becomes kind of obvious.
And it looks like that's going to be it for us. Once again, a huge thanks to Azo for helping me with the video today, as it definitely would not have been possible without him. You can check out his channel at the link in the description or the annotation on your screen, and I definitely recommend him to anyone trying to get a step up and get better at League of Legends. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you didn't, hit that dislike. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.